Good evening. What would you do if you could reduce the impacts to Oregon from one of these two hazards? Would you choose the really big one, which is infrequent but overwhelming for the Pacific Northwest? Or would you choose the really frequent one, which is less regionally devastating, but is happening every year and almost persistently? As a result of a conversation I had with my daughter at breakfast one morning, our group at the University of Oregon chooses to do both. Tonight, I'm going to tell you the plan of how we're going to do that. Imagine for a minute you're on the coast of Oregon, you're in Coos Bay. It's one of those days where it's beautiful, it's sunny, it's calm, the wind's not blowing. I told you to imagine it. Meanwhile, 30 miles off the coast of Newport, Oregon, the central segment of the Cascade subduction zone unzips and releases a magnitude 8 earthquake. On your smartphone sometime in the future, you receive the following alert.
Earthquake, earthquake, strong shaking expected in 21 seconds. This is a test. Earthquake, earthquake, strong shaking expected in 11 seconds. This is a test. Earthquake, earthquake, strong shaking expected in 2 seconds.
What would you do with those 30 seconds? Would you drop, cover, and hold? Would you do it calmly so that after the shaking stopped, you would think about how to evacuate to higher ground? I certainly hope that's what all of us in the room would do. Now consider the following. You're here in Portland, and on this fateful day, there's a full margin rupture of the Cascade subduction zone, extending from Cape Mendocino in Northern California up to Vancouver Island in Canada. What could you do if you had 2 to 3 minutes of warning, which is what would be provided if that earthquake began in southern Cascadia? Would you and your family get someplace safe? Would TriMet take trains off the steel bridge? Would we stop trolley cars from going over the Broadway Bridge? What would we do with our infrastructure? Would we shut it down and secure it so that we could recover more quickly afterwards? A fully implemented earthquake early warning system for the Pacific Northwest can provide Portland tens of seconds to 3 minutes of warning in these types of catastrophic events. Remarkably, that future already exists in Japan and Mexico, and it has for several decades. They built their earthquake early warning systems after catastrophic events that killed many thousands of people. In the following video, listen to the siren that are warning citizens of Mexico City that strong shaking is imminent.
Este edificio se movió horrible, horrible. Tronó horrible. Que se salgan, la pared se rompió. Que se salgan. Que se salgan, se va a caer, ese edificio se va a caer. Dios mío, Dios mío, Dios mío, Dios mío.
As I've said, both those countries built theirs after devastating earthquakes. Our goal along the west coast of the U.S. is to try to build an earthquake early warning system before the next killer earthquake occurs in California, Oregon, or Washington. You may have heard in the past couple weeks that Kate Brown released the following agenda, Resiliency 2025, improving our readiness for the Cascadia earthquake and tsunami. One of the central tenets of her plan is to build an earthquake early warning system by 2023, just 5 years from now. All along the West Coast, universities and the USGS are working to establish that system. However, Oregon's is only 50% complete. If Governor Brown's policy agenda is adopted, it will catapult us from being last place in receiving shake alerts to amongst the front runners to receive these valuable alerts for the public. In addition, Governor Brown's vision for early warning systems extends beyond earthquakes to fires, floods, and landslides. And tonight I'd like to tell you about some of that. Okay, so what is ShakeAlert at the high level? ShakeAlert is a system of sensors distributed over the West Coast that's delivering data in real time back to central processing areas so that we can send out alerts and give actions, or people can take actions. The system itself is designed by the USGS and primarily 4 universities along the West Coast: Caltech, UC Berkeley, the University of Oregon, and the University of Washington. My research and the research of my colleagues at the University of Oregon focuses on both the pure and applied science that motivates the ShakeAlert system. Tonight, I'd like to fill you in on some of that research to give you some of the background of what we've been doing and to provide you a vision for a multi-hazard system that can apply to a number of hazards we have in the Pacific Northwest. But first of all, a little bit of science. We have to understand the gorilla in the room, the Cascade subduction zone. The Cascade subduction zone extends from Cape Mendocino in Northern California up to Vancouver Island. And the lock zone, that region is primarily responsible for storing energy and it's released during earthquakes, sits offshore of the Pacific Northwest, and you can see it in the map on your left-hand side. Between 2010 and 2015, myself and my colleagues at the University of Oregon led a 5-year experiment called the Cascade Initiative that deployed seismometers both onshore and offshore for the first time globally at this scale, so we could take a look at the Cascade subduction zone and understand this beast both up close and in depth. From my point of view, the story and the legacy of the Cascade Initiative are still being written as dozens of scientists from all over the world are sifting through that data. But I want to tell you what we learned a little bit from that experiment, and what we've learned from previous things is that there is a consensus. In the Pacific Northwest, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We're expecting a really big earthquake. The probability of a magnitude 9 earthquake that ruptures the full length of Cascadia is somewhere between 10 and 20% in the next 50 years. If you were all given those odds for the Mega Millions a couple of weeks ago, we'd all be out buying tickets. A partial rupture that extends from Cape Mendocino up to Cape Blanco would release a magnitude 8, and the probability of that is 25 to 40% in the next 50 years. And I'm not even referring to the crustal faults that sit on top of the North American plate. Those in the I-5 corridor from Seattle down through the Eugene area, in the next 50 years, there's a likelihood of over 80% that those earthquakes will occur. And you may have been familiar with the news recently in Portland for the faults they found near Mount Hood and also the Portland Hills faults. Those crustal faults can release energy at around 6.5 or 7 magnitude. I actually should point out the difference in energy between a 7 and a 9 is about 1,000. All right, so maybe you're not that familiar with the Cascade subduction zone in detail, so here's the exercise. You can take your 2 hands, palms up, and your right hand is North America, and your left hand is the oceanic plate or the Juan de Fuca plate. And you can bring those together. On a geologic time scale, those 2 plates are moving by one another, with the Juan de Fuca moving slowly down into the Earth's mantle. However, it does it in fits and starts. It doesn't do it gradually. So take your right hand, push the Juan de Fuca plate against North America, and what happens is your knuckles buckle upwards and move backwards to the east. That cannot happen indefinitely. Sooner or later, like a spring, North America is going to pop forwards. If, for example, the first 2 fingers on your right hand move forwards, that's a magnitude 8. And the best science we have right now, which there still needs to be a lot of it done, suggests that could happen in northern or southern Cascadia. If, however, all 4 of your fingers go at once and unzip from south to north or north to south and give you a magnitude 9, it's going to pop forward by 30 to 100 feet. Coastline is going to drop relative to sea level, and there'll be a large tsunami generated. All right. So how does ShakeAlert work? Back to applied science. ShakeAlert, conceptually, is dead simple. The idea is to put enough sensors throughout the West Coast so that when an earthquake begins at a particular location, a small number of sensors pick it up as quickly as possible. So in the water drop analogy, we detect here and we warn there. We're not doing earthquake prediction. We're quickly finding an earthquake, it's happened, and we're letting people at more distant locations know that strong shaking is going to arrive. From the seismological point of view, we do that with two different types of waves. One's called the primary wave, or the P wave. We're very creative with our names. And that's a not damaging or fast wave. And we use that wave to locate, estimate the size of the earthquake, and tell people at a distant location. The S wave, the secondary wave, is the one that's damaging and it travels more slowly. And what we're trying to do is use super fast telemetry to bring the data from remote locations throughout the Pacific Northwest back to computers and off to your, hopefully, cell phones in the future. Now I want you to remember telemetry. You use it every day. I used it today driving up I-5 with my smartphone. Remarkably enough, I dropped coverage. And I'm sure all of you have done that using the telemetry system from the cell phone companies. So remember telemetry. I'm going to come back to it, and we're going to leverage that, but a different type of telemetry for the alert wildfire system. So what can we do with shake alerts? There are a lot of things we can do with them, and there are three broad categories. First, people. We can warn people to drop, cover, and hold on. Those simple actions have been proven to save lives and save millions, nearly billions of dollars of medical expenses. If you're caught unaware and you start running in this building right now, that's a problem. The second thing we can do is things. We can warn the electrical power generating facilities that strong shaking is going to arrive and that they ought to really shut down their turbines, which they can do very quickly. The other thing we can do is shut off valves in all of our drinking water supplies so that after the shaking's gone, the water that we desperately need afterwards hasn't drained out through broken pipes in the region. And the third thing is transportation, in terms of things that we can do. Slowing down trains, putting red lights on bridges so that people don't cross those bridges. Okay, so there's people and things. What's the third thing we can do? Situational awareness. Something as simple as letting our first responders know that strong shaking is going to arrive and they should open the fire doors on the fire stations and get the trucks outside so they're available afterwards. All right, so that's really awesome, right? That's like, what more could you want? Well, there's a problem for Oregonians. We're in last place. We simply don't have enough stations in the ground to provide alerts to the public. Currently in the state of Oregon, we are only 38% towards being built out for the technical implementation plan of ShakeAlert. We will not be allowed to provide alerts to our public until we are at least 75% of the way built out, and we have a credible education and outreach program for the public. Well, you know, as my mother would tell me, it's a stinker to be last. So, from my point of view, what I want to do is take those lemons and make lemonade. How are we going to do that? One of the advantages we have by being last is we haven't built out our telemetry system yet. We haven't built out a seismic network that's solely dependent on the cell phone tower system. And I hope you understand that cell phone towers are not the most reliable way to transmit data. How often have you dropped a phone call? How many parts of the state are not covered by cell phone coverage? What happens when everyone starts tweeting after a big event? The data system gets flooded. So what we're trying to do, and this is Sarah Meyer from our group here climbing one of the towers, is move towards microwave telemetry, which is a much more robust and much more hardened system. And we're following the lead of our colleagues from Alert Wildfire, who have been establishing microwave telemetry systems for science and technology throughout the West. Well, what could we do with a really high-speed robust data telemetry system like microwave. Perhaps we could prevent this. I think all of you probably remember the total eclipse from 2017. That definitely blocked out the sun, right? You also remember that shortly afterwards, the sun was blocked out for days, nearly weeks, throughout the Willamette Valley, and we all choked from the smoke that came through the area. What could we do with alert wildfire is we could approach this problem and try and reduce that hazard. Alert Wildfire is a consortium of 3 universities, the University of Nevada, Reno, the University of California, San Diego, and the University of Oregon. We've installed cameras throughout Nevada, Idaho, California, Oregon, Washington, and there are many, many more coming through private support, through utility support in the state of California. Thus far, Alert Wildfire cameras have provided vital intel for over 500 fires in the West. These have mitigated the environmental impact of these fires, and they've also mitigated the damage to the built infrastructure that we have. So our vision is to build out a system that is both ShakeAlert and Alert Wildfire. I want to come back to where we started, which is that our group at the University of Oregon is committed to reducing the impact of living with the Pacific Northwest landscape. Whether or not it's the inevitable and infrequent large Cascadia earthquake, or it's the persistent and frequent wildland fires, our goal is to build out a combination of science and technology that can allow us to reduce those hazards. I should say, normally I get about 60 minutes. I think today I managed to do this in about 13. Bill Walton's going to throw it down in about 40 seconds.
I was with Professor Toomey this morning, the head of seismic studies
Was he
at the
part of the
University of
MRI?
Oregon. No, he was riding his bike outside. And it was a great meeting with Doug.
What does this have to do with Dana and the timeout?
Seismic, earth-shaking,
Okay, just hoping you were gonna get
volcanoes, eruptions, lava flows, fire in the mountain, Grateful Dead coming to Autzen Stadium.
This is what we're talking about here.
Thank you.